All right. Welcome, everybody, to our March startup grind. If we were together meeting in person today, I envision all of us drinking or having access to green beer, right? I mean, it's St.
It's a
Patty's
must. You
Day.
have
I
to.
mean, we would have had to have done that. So maybe next year, if we could find a way to line it up to where we could do this on St. Patty's Day and all of us have some green beverages celebrating together, that would be a lot of fun. Well, first of all, I want to thank Austin for helping with the tech support issues. He got Jim on camera and all that. So we got a wonderful team that makes this Startup Grind chapter go, and we're very grateful for that. Also, before we get started with our interview, a big shout out to our sponsors that make these events possible, make all these events free. Number one, I want to give a shout out to Amplify Louisville. Larry Horn and Mike DeCenso have been huge supporters of everything that we're doing. Also, Render Capital is also one of our sponsors. Mary Grace is here this morning. We appreciate that. Mary Grace, I'm actually wearing a Render Capital t-shirt. You guys can't see it because of the camera angle, but supporting our sponsors here. Also, Citation Labs is a sponsor, and Strategex. So we're very grateful for those companies that have made this possible. And also just want to give you a preview. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers coming up in April, May, and June. We've already got all those speakers planned out, so be looking for that here very soon. So you can go ahead and save those dates and get that registered. So, well, I want to go ahead and dig in here to the conversation. I'm really excited about today. I met Jim a couple of years ago. I had a networking event and just shared what was going on with Cornbread, and I was amazed then by his story. And then I had a conversation with Gil Holland a few weeks ago, and he was talking about Jim and what he was doing, and it prompted me to reach out to Jim, and we had a nice conversation, and he filled me in on some things, and it just really said this would be a great person to come on and share his story and what's happening with his business, and even the way that he came about founding this company is fantastic, and I really enjoy stories like that. So Jim, we are very excited to have you today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and share your story with us.
Adam, thanks for having me. It's really great. And just before we get too deep into the backstory of how we got here, I just want to give two quick shout outs to two people that you already mentioned, Larry Horn and Mary Grace Ragsdale. We at Cornbread Hemp would not be in the strong position that we are here in 2021 without Larry Horn putting me in touch with Render Capital and their partnership with WeFunder. That was the culmination of our networking as we were working on raising funds. I want to say last year, but it was the year before last year. Time has now become difficult to measure. But we were frustrated in the local startup community space because we were trying to raise some money, and Louisville has a great investor pool, but it's also a small club. And coming in as we did in a second generation of hemp startups in the community, it was difficult to find members of the local investor class who had not already been touched by other hemp startups. So we were looking towards crowdfunding, and we were working towards crowdfunding on another platform. And Larry Horn stopped me and was like, "Why are you doing it there and not at WeFunder?" And I was like, "I don't know, because of these reasons." He was like, "No, you should do it at WeFunder because of this thing at Render." And without Larry Horn shepherding us in that direction, we wouldn't. We'd be in a much less strong position than we are today. So shout out to Larry, shout out to Mary Grace. It's been really fantastic working with them, building the brand, building this company, and then our Reg CF crowdfund last year that was incredibly successful. We learned a lot, and by learning a lot, we kind of knocked it out of the park in terms of what we were able to do in the middle of a pandemic and the lockdown. We really kind of made some lemonade out of the situation, and so before we get too deep in it, I just wanted to acknowledge our friends in the startup community here in Louisville for taking care of us, because it was really important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing that, Jim. And I love hearing stories of how the startup community works together. That's what Amplify is here to do, right? That's part of their mission, to make connections and to make recommendations like that to Render. And it's really neat to hear a success story like that of how their work is really paying off. So, yeah, and so definitely we want to get into a little bit more of exactly what you learned, how you were able to make lemonade out of it, but we'll wait till we get deeper in this. So, what I'd like to do now, Jim, is just kind of take us back to your early years and talk about the thing that ignited that passion for being an entrepreneur and what kind of got you to the point to where you chose to be a co-founder in Cornbread Hemp.
So I grew up my father is an entrepreneur. He ran a grocery store in my hometown for 40 years or so. So I grew up in an entrepreneur family, but I never thought it was for me. I had my head in the clouds. I was running off to school to be a writer. It was not my role. I saw the hard work and the dedication and the long hours that being self-employed took its toll on our family, my dad, and it was easy to see the time he was putting in and difficult at the time in my life to recognize the benefits and the rewards that came from being an entrepreneur and being self-employed. And that came later for me. I went off to school. I wanted to be a writer. There was a story from my town that was really important. And that was this Cornbread Mafia story that when I was in middle school, parents of my classmates started getting arrested. A lot of them. In the end, 70 men from my neck of the woods arrested on 30 farms in 10 states with something like 200 tons of marijuana. Federal law enforcement prosecutors called it the largest domestic marijuana syndicate in American history. And of these 70 guys that were arrested, none of them talked to cooperate with the feds. They were really loyal to their families and to their people and did their time without telling on anyone. And that left the story kind of airtight in a black hole. It wasn't able to be told. And so it sat there untold for 20 years. And I remained obsessed with it because I knew as I went out into the world, I went to school here locally at Center College, and then I went to the Brown University writing program, and then I moved to New York, and then I went to the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. And in the course of that educational journey, realized that these stories that I had from Kentucky, these cornbread stories had value. Like people were really dismissive of me being from Kentucky at first, but when I would roll out these stories of Cornbread Mafia, they'd be like, "Wait a minute, what? What are you saying?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're." Marijuana guys didn't have lions. Our guys had lions, and it was the sort of story that I recognized was superlative, was exemplary. It had currency in the culture. People needed to know that this giant operation happened where it did, and the Columbia Journalism School really gave me the tools to dig into that. Because no one was talking, I had to go about this in a very sort of measured way. I had to go get documents and news reports, not just from the time period, but before the time period, to start to put all this together into some sort of historical context. So in the end, the Cornbread Mafia book that I reported wasn't just a story about a crime syndicate. It became a cultural history, a social history of my neck of the woods in Kentucky, and became a story of a group of men operating inside of Prohibition, very much rhyming with alcohol prohibition in the 1920s, 1930s. So the comparisons, the connections between alcohol prohibition and cannabis prohibition as it related to this Cornbread Mafia story became clearer and clearer to me as I worked on the book. And that's really what I wanted to communicate while writing the book, is that the similarities between alcohol prohibition and cannabis prohibition were nearly identical, as just a different chapter of the same book. And then on the other side of that, the success of the book led me into a journalism career. I was covering cannabis policy at a fairly high level. I was a nationally recognized journalist covering cannabis for outlets like Politico. And I was also freelancing for outlets like the Washington Post when news would break in Kentucky. So I was developing a good, strong journalism career, but I was always looking for my exit from journalism into something that allowed me to capitalize on the knowledge and the connections that I had made and learned along the way in the cannabis space. And in 2018, when the second farm bill that included hemp, passed Congress, and legalized hemp outright for good, I knew that there was this opportunity, because the corporations that were engaged in CBD production derived from hemp at the time, and even now, were not doing a good job making quality products and making products that reflected the integrity of the 250-year tradition we have here in Kentucky of growing cannabis. And that's what I wanted to do, what I wanted to achieve, why I stopped journalism and jumped into the entrepreneurial space, even after having seen my father not struggle necessarily, but just work his tail off for decades as an entrepreneur. I knew that it was now time for me to take that risk and to take that jump into the entrepreneurial space. My business partner is my cousin, Eric Zipperly. He has an MBA and an e-commerce background. So we really complement each other in terms of our skill sets. And we've just been at it ever since.
Wow. So what an amazing journey to have the personal connection to seeing all these things happening when you're growing up, to going through the academic training of becoming a journalist, and then that leading directly to you specializing in this industry and being able to write a book from it. So it's absolutely fascinating how your story has weaved to get you where you are today. Now, one of the
Thanks.
things that I hear from you, Jim, when we talk is passion behind what you do. I mean, I hear the passion about hemp and just its benefits and things like that. So tell us a little bit about your perspective on some of the common misconceptions out there from people about, CBD and hemp and its uses. I mean, do we have a public that is primarily just uneducated and doesn't know a lot about this because they're relying on this media story or that media story? Why do you think the public struggles with this so much, and they don't know as much as they need to know?
Well, it's fascinating, and thanks for the question. It's true. The public does not understand or know as much about CBD as hemp-derived cannabinoids as we would like them to. And part of this problem is because the FDA is still slow to act in issuing regulations. So companies like ours have a difficult time communicating to consumers what our products might be good for, because I can't, as a co-founder of a hemp company, tell you what our customers are using our products for without running afoul of FDA regulations. So it's really frustrating as a former journalist to feel like my First Amendment rights are being infringed upon. But we have to be really careful with messaging and really careful with how we talk about our products, because until the FDA acknowledges that hemp-derived CBD, hemp-derived cannabinoids are a dietary supplement, we can't even make dietary supplement structure function claims. It's really tricky to talk about CBD and why people want to use them. The one thing that I go back to is in 2019, Consumer Reports and Gallup both conducted independent surveys of CBD users. So together, they both interviewed thousands of CBD users. And the results of both of those surveys were nearly identical in terms of why people told these two news outlets why they were using CBD products, and that's pain, anxiety, and sleep. Mm-hmm. So there's other reasons why people are using CBD, but the three primary reasons why people are turning to CBD are pain, anxiety, and sleep. Now, again, this is not me saying that my products from my company cure, treat, prevent, or diagnose any of these conditions, but this is what journalism outlets are saying based on anecdotal surveys of current CBD users.
So, Jim, from your perspective, why do you think that the FDA is slow walking this? Is it a old school mindset of the CBD and hemp being so closely related to marijuana or drug use? I mean, what's the issue here?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, the FDA is empowered by the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, which was written a long time ago, and it's continually amended by Congress. But the law that underlies the FDA's authority never conceptualized or conceived of the sort of plant-based wellness that hemp cannabis can bring. It's just anathema to the nature of the legislation that undergirds the FDA's power. So while we feel like this will happen in time, it's just something new for the FDA. It's something that they're taking their time to explore because, frankly, it's just new. And there could be some pushback from existing pharmaceutical companies that have influence with the FDA who feel like CBD and hemp-derived cannabinoids could be a competitor to existing pharmaceuticals. I have no evidence of that. It's just a sense one gets that maybe perhaps there's an issue at play, because certainly cannabinoid wellness, hemp-derived CBD products can compete with traditional over-the-counter products. So there could be some of that, but genuinely nothing for certain that one would know.
Yeah. So Jim, it's very interesting you said that. Health and wellness is something that's very important to me. I'm involved with a lot of communities in those areas, and I know quite a few people in those areas that take CBD and talk about the many benefits that is derived from them. And I was actually going to ask, is that a concern? Some of the big pharma things that see this potentially as a competitor to some of the over-counter or even other things. So it's interesting that you brought that up. So it's
and again, I have no evidence
of
this.
Sure.
I'm not making any accusations.
Yeah.
It's something we hear from customers.
Yeah.
It's just a thing. Like it's potentially a thing.
Yeah, and I think though that the personal stories, and that's one of the reasons why CBD has become so popular. So I live here in the Middletown area, and I can tell you within where I live, there are 5 CBD shops within about 3 miles of where I live. I mean, they're all over the place. So this is one of those things that I think as people are taking the product and having a good experience with it, and they see some life changes that's happening to them, that they're literally just telling other people. So I think that there's some natural organic growth happening as this is having positive benefits on other people. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. So let's talk a little bit specifically about your brand and how you and your cousin got started with Cornbread. Obviously, I think that the name of it is pretty self-evident based on your story why you chose Cornbread Hemp. But what's different about your company? What's the unique selling proposition? How is it that you think you're going to be able to take this to scale, whereas a lot of the other competitors in your space that are doing the same thing, they may or may not?
Great question. So yeah, we named the company Cornbread, in one sense after the book that I'd written, but also as a response to corporate CBD that was prevalent in 2018, early 2019, that still exists today as market leaders who go out of their way to try to deny hemp's connection to cannabis, hemp's connection to marijuana, keep saying, oh, hemp is not marijuana, hemp is something completely different than marijuana. Prominent politicians want to refer to marijuana as hemp's illicit cousin. But these are all baloney. Genetically speaking, the cannabinoid hemp that we're using for cornbread, that all CBD products are using, is 90% identical to high THC marijuana that's legal in 35 states for medical marijuana purposes. So it's not a matter of which states have legalized medical marijuana. It's now which states have not. And Kentucky is one of 15 states that have not legalized medical marijuana. But we named the company Cornbread in part because, as a response to this notion in the CBD marketplace that hemp and cannabis are different, and they're really not. We're a cannabis company on the legal hemp side of the dividing line. That's how we see ourselves. And Cornbread evokes the excellence in Kentucky hemp production, both when it was legal before Prohibition and when it was not legal during Prohibition. And now that it's legal again, and it's important to think about not that hemp is newly legal, but hemp is legal again, that cannabis is becoming legal again, because before 1937, cannabis was totally legal nationwide, right? So it's important to know that we're returning to a state of nature, not changing course and doing something new and different and scary. We're ending the scary period and coming into a period more in line with our connection to nature as it relates to the cannabis plant. So Cornbread as a brand name evokes all of that, but primarily it sets the stage for creating the best possible CBD products that we can make, and the products then speak for themselves. And in this case, our products are, for the most part, USDA certified organic, full spectrum. All of our products are full spectrum, which means they contain a legal amount of THC, which currently is up to 0.3%, which is arbitrary and low, but that is those are the current rules of the road. So we're USDA organic, full spectrum, and then we extract this hemp with just the hemp flower, which is another unique selling proposition that's difficult to explain to consumers, because almost all other CBD brands are using the whole plant. They cut the plant at the stalk, and then they put those plants through wood chippers and pelletize the whole thing, the flower, the leaves, the stalks, the stems, and then take those pellets and do an extraction process. We shuck the flower from the plant, and we only use the plant, or we only use the flowers in our extraction process, and that makes for a much more a much better end product that tastes like it's supposed to taste. Any CBD product that has a cover flavor like peppermint or lemon lime or cinnamon, they're just using those flavors to cover up the grassy bitterness of their whole plant extract. When we do a flower only extract, we don't need a cover flavor because it tastes exactly like it should.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So curious, you said that hemp prior to 1937 was legal, and then we went through this period of prohibition. Prior to 1937, how common was hemp use? Was it a pretty commonly used flower for various things?
So hemp prior to 1937, it's very fascinating. So the cannabis plant is one of 6% of flowering plants that's dioecious, which means the males and the females are separate plants. Male plants and female plants are separate. So other common examples of this would be ginkgo trees. Like you plant a ginkgo tree and you want it to be, I forget what it is, you want it to be male and not female because the female makes the berries. And if you get the wrong one, the berries smell bad. So cannabis is a similar thing. Males and females are separate plants. And in Kentucky, the first hemp crop was planted, documented hemp crop was planted in Boyle County in 1775. So when Kentucky was still a county of the colony of Virginia. So hemp production in Kentucky predates the American Revolution, predates statehood. That was grown with males and females together. It was grown for fiber. It was grown for seed. Principally during the antebellum period, Kentucky's hemp crop was used for twine and burlap bagging that supported the cotton plantations in the deeper South, as well as for naval rope and rigging and canvas for sails and whatnot. But definitely as a support crop for cotton. And at the same time, cannabis was being used and smoked in cigarette form in metropolitan areas around the country, particularly in Black communities, which is why after alcohol prohibition ended in 1933, that prohibitionists in D.C. are looking for a new product to prohibit in order to prosecute that prohibition against communities of color. So that's why one principal reason why cannabis becomes illegal, and the word is not cannabis. Cannabis is used in medicinal tinctures and ointments by major pharmaceutical companies of the time, like Eli Lilly. But when it's made illegal, when it's prohibited, they use the Mexican word marijuana to make it illegal. They don't use cannabis. So it's a tell at the time that marijuana is being used as a racist code word to make something illegal in order to then control a population.
Wow. I had no idea. And Jim, in our conversations, that's one of the reasons I was so excited to bring you to be your speaker here, not just about your experience in business, but just from an education standpoint. I mean, what you just shared, I've never heard that before, but that is just absolutely mind blowing to me. So thank you for sharing that. Also, for those of you that have questions for Jim, please drop them in the chat function when we get to the Q&A section here about quarter till, 10 till. I'll be happy to ask Jim any questions that you'll have. So please get those rolling here over the next few minutes. So, all right, Jim, well, let's kind of fast forward a little bit. So you and your cousin, you started Cornbread, had this idea, the organic hemp, or just something better out there, the CBD products, excuse me. Tell me a little bit about your process from ideation to where you knew that you had something from scale, the process of going to get the funding. Just walk us through that and some of the primary lessons you learned that you think would be impactful to other startups as they're going through something similar.
We really built this airplane in the air. You know, in retrospect, looking at our timeline, what we did, how we did it, the time frame that we executed on, is super aggressive, and that's in large part a tribute to my business partner Eric, who just goes at it and sets us a pace that's really fantastic. We started in 2019 with conventional products, by which I mean non-organic. But during 2019, as we had conventional products in the space, we were working with organic farmers, organic producers here in Kentucky to flip the switch. And because of my connections in the journalism space, and by virtue of being known as the author of the Cornbread Mafia book, we were able to plug into the organic supply chain before anyone else. So by the end of 2019, we became the first Kentucky company to offer USDA organic CBD oils, and that was a really big deal, and really, set the stage for us being a leader in this industry from Kentucky by virtue of being first to market with USDA organic CBD products. So that was step one in this long process. And then as we entered last year, we were talking about doing a fundraise, and we assumed we were doing a standard Reg D fundraise. But then as we talked about a little bit before, because of the conventional problems with raising money in a small investor pool like we have here in Louisville, combined with COVID, crowdfunding just presented itself as this perfect opportunity. And I know we might talk about Reg CF rules changing and increasing the limit to 5 million, which is this incredible opportunity. Raising money the standard Regulation D way for a startup in the year of our Lord 2021 is really backward and asinine, and you can't tell people you're doing what you're doing, but you need them to know. Like, it's just baffling, right? It just makes no sense with anything else that we do in any other context. You can't talk about it on social media. You can't do anything, right? So Reg CF, the crowdfunding regulation, just completely frees a person, a company up to do all the things that you feel like you ought to be able to do in terms of making noise, generating content, letting people know what you're up to and what you're doing. It takes the gag out of your mouth, let you talk about it with anyone. You don't have to have an accredited investor in front of you before you lay out your plan. Mm-hmm. So Reg CF is just a lifesaver, and I think it's going to make a lot of startups bounce right out of the gate, because as we've experienced with Cornbread, you don't have to have you don't have to have a whole lot lined up. All you have to do is be ready and contribute, with what you can. And what Render Capital was able to do with WeFunder, and I think that WeFunder also has these partnerships with other regional funds like Render in other cities across across America and the world, is my understanding. Although I can only speak to the Render Capital partnership here in Louisville, but just fantastic. Render agreed to match our first 20K invested on the WeFunder platform, and they also got us a discount on the WeFunder fee. So right off the bat, our job was immediately easier. So the first day we turned on the spigot and made our WeFunder campaign live, I think it was April 2nd of 2020. We had our first 20K in the bank on WeFunder by 10:30 that morning, and we let Render know, like, all right, we got it, we're ready. And by lunch, boom, Render was in, and so by the end of the first day, we're over 50K. And so, like, we generated momentum right out of the gate, and we got on the top page of the WeFunder page. We started getting investors from California and around the world. By the end, we have investors from, all 6 continents, all 6 populated continents. And it's just this remarkable network. We ended up with 900 investors, I believe. Average investment was something like $450. Minimum investment was $100. We had a few investors at the $10,000 level, and a couple at $5K, $2,500. But the vast majority of our investors came in at $100, $500, $1,000, and really, gave us the gas to level up and to start scaling this thing.
Wow, that is so cool that things like WeFunder are available. And you're right that some of the new regulations that have happened, in many cases, it's almost democratized investing for startups and people that want to do that. So many more people now can have access to it. And the benefit it has to companies like yours is just unbelievable. Our speaker in April is Jessica Bledsoe with Paver, and she also went down a similar path of which you have, and very similar results. And even Harlan Beer Company, they've done the same thing. And I think on the first day, Gil Holland told me they raised like 100K, something like that, something ridiculous, if I remember correctly. But I mean, it's such a great platform. So let me ask you this, Jim. So for any startup that has, they've really got some market validation, they know there's something there, would you encourage them to explore offerings like what Render has with their partnership with WeFunder? Is that something that you think makes sense for a lot of folks to pursue, or do you see a variation between going down traditional fundraising versus the crowdsourcing mechanism?
Look, I've not done a traditional fundraise, so there may still be some value in that for a startup, depending on the lane of that startup. I think, like if we're talking about regionally in the Kentucky, Southern Indiana area, healthcare startups, tech startups may still have a path in standard Reg D fundraising. But frankly, especially with the cap being raised to 5 million, like, why would you not?
Yeah.
Like, it's just remarkable, because like, we're a consumer packaged good company. So we're not just creating investors, we're creating customers by getting investors, right? And we're turning customers into investors, and we're turning investors into customers. You can't do that with a Reg D fundraise. So the benefits of democratizing the process and spreading it out and asking for much smaller amounts from more people, in terms of generating brand awareness, generating customers, generating advocates and ambassadors across the country. There's just nothing else that does it as quickly, as efficiently, and as cheaply as going and doing a crowdfund. It's great.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Jennifer Williams just shared in the chat that, one thing, and she didn't give a lot of detail here, and I don't know enough to speak to this, but she said that folks that have gone down the crowdfunding path, she just shared that subsequent VCs hate it. So I don't know what that means or doesn't mean, but that's something that I will explore based on what Jennifer said. So thank you for sharing that, Jennifer.
Well, what she's talking about, I believe, later rounds of investing for people who've done crowdfunding, it can mess up your cap table.
Okay.
Because if you have 100 investors on a crowdfund, then your cap table gets all messy because you have 100 investors and big VC company wants to come in and do a thing, and they look at your cap table and there's all these investors they have to deal with.
Sure,
They
that makes sense.
But WeFunder fixes this problem. WeFunder fixes this problem. It rolls all of those investors into one line on the cap table.
Okay.
So subsequent investing rounds are not complicated by the WeFunder structure because WeFunder understood this problem and solved it. So no messy cap table on the WeFunder convertible note raise.
Got it. Okay, great discussion here, Jennifer. Thank you for bringing that up. What you just also shared in the chat. SPV is a special purpose vehicle, so great discussion here coming in with this. So, Jim, I want to circle back to something you said earlier regarding your product, you all being first to market with organic cannabis products. Tell me, how important is that to the overall quality of the product? I know personally, my family and I, when at all possible, we do buy organic. We've just chosen to make that decision for us. But does it make a difference in terms of the quality of the product? Do people get a different experience when they use your product as an organic grade versus something that's not organically grown?
So it's a great question. Before I answer it fully, I want to get my qualifiers in, which are that the USDA organic program does not approve of, it's not a seal of approval. It doesn't approve of the products that bear its seal. It's only saying that based on a third-party certifier, this product meets the standards of the USDA National Organics Program. But what this means, especially for CBD, it means two things. Because the FDA has not yet issued regulations, there are no federal regulations for production quality for CBD products, which means it remains the Wild West. Stuff is crazy out there, and accurate news reporting continues to show that lots of CBD products out there are falsely labeled, mislabeled, poorly labeled, fraudulently labeled, and contain contamination. With the USDA organic seal, because every ingredient of the product meets the USDA organic standards, you can rest assured that there's no pesticides, that there's no synthetic fertilizers, that the soil is free of contamination of things like heavy metals. So the cannabis plant is naturally a very strong bioaccumulator, which means it sucks up all of the nutrients and chemicals in the soil into the plant, maybe better than any other plant on earth. Which is great if you're interested in getting all the nutrients out of the soil. Really, really bad if that soil is contaminated for any reason, because those contaminants get into the plant. It makes the cannabis plant, the hemp plant, good for brownfield remediation, because you can plant a bunch of hemp and it sucks up the contamination out of the ground. But really, really bad if you're using contaminated hemp for a CBD product. The extraction process concentrates the extract, right? We're extracting just the resinous oil from the flowers for our CBD products and concentrating it. And if you're concentrating the good stuff, if there's bad stuff in there too, you're concentrating that bad stuff along the way. So it's not just that you might have a pesticide in the plant or a heavy metal like lead or cadmium or nickel. That contamination then gets concentrated in the extraction process, and that's no good. So until there's FDA regulations, there's really no way to know what's in a product. Now, I will say that many conventional non-organic CBD brands are doing third-party lab testing, as we do, to ensure that there's these contamination issues are not a problem in their products. But that third-party lab testing for safety for pesticides, heavy metals, residual solvents, bacteria, mold, fungus, these sorts of things that seem second nature and natural, common sense, these are not required by law. They're not required by federal law to do. And so some major companies are doing these tests in-house. So they're doing their own tests, and that makes them subject to scrutiny as to whether or not they're being as truthful as possible. So that USDA organic seal guarantees to the consumer that the product meets these very high standards. So that's the most important reason that we went through the trouble of getting products certified organic, because it's a quick, immediate way to communicate to a consumer that this product is exemplary, that it stands out, that it's meeting a higher standard than conventional products in the space.
All right. Wow. Thank you for sharing so much of the science and how all this works. I mean, it's such an education you've given us here today. So before we go on to the rapid fire questions and then some Q&A things, tell me a little bit about what's next for Cornbread Hemp. What are you seeing just looking over the next 12 to 18 months as we're starting to exit out of the pandemic? What do you see as far as regulatory issues? Just give us a sneak peek about what the future looks like for you all.
Sure. So we started this year rolling out certified organic topical products. So now our entire CBD topical line is certified organic. We have 2 lotions and a balm that are certified organic, which is also unique and new. And we're continuing new product rollout in April with our CBD gummies. They will be USDA organic, full spectrum, and vegan. So we're using apple pectin instead of gelatin to make to sort of to bind them. So that's a very sophisticated product that we're really excited about. Full spectrum CBD gummies that are certified organic and vegan friendly are going to be a huge part of how we help to grow our company over the next few quarters. So that's step one. As we move out of the pandemic, what the pandemic did to us is it shut down our retail development. Retail really took a back seat because it essentially, frankly, last year died. Our ability to get our products into stores because the grocery supply chains were so taxed by pandemic maintenance, just keeping existing products on the shelf. And no one wants to linger in a store and talk to anyone anymore because they go in to get what they're getting and they get out. So retail development in the next 12 months as we shake off the pandemic will be a part of our next stage of growth. And then, 18 months from now, we'll probably start another fundraising round after we grow into our next stage of ourselves. But right now we're focused really on the next quarter in front of us, which is growing this company online and introducing our CBD gummies to the world.
Awesome. Very good. Well, it sounds like many good things are in store. The investment capital that you have received, if you've used it well, you got a great product roadmap. So good stuff, Jim. It's going to be fun to see what the future holds over the next few weeks and quarters. And so we can't wait. So, all right. So we got about 10 minutes left. So for those of you that have questions, go ahead and drop them either in the Q&A section of the chat, or you can even put it in the journal section. It doesn't matter. I'll go grab them. So Jim, what we've got here, I've got about 10 to 15 questions I'm going to ask you. And basically your first response, 1 or 2 words, just whatever comes to mind, fire away. So you ready? All right.
Let's do it.
Are you a morning or a night person?
These days, I'm a morning person. I switched over at some point. It's
Got it. Okay. What is one thing that annoys you the most?
Oh gosh, someone with their gas cap open on the road. Like you can't go fix it. You want to let them know, but you can't.
That's good. I've never heard that one before, but that's really good. Okay. What is the strangest thing you've ever eaten?
Oh gosh. I mean, turtle is that, I probably can go worse than turtle, but I'm going to stick with turtle.
What is the worst job you could possibly have?
Oh gosh. Well, when I was working for my father at the grocery store, I had to enter in all of the cigarette and tobacco items into the computer and the UPC codes manually by hand. And I still can't stand the smell of cigarettes.
Got it. Okay. So if you have the opportunity to buy a yacht, what would you name it?
Oh gosh. I mean, first of all, like you're talking about like a disgusting level of wealth at this point. So like it just doesn't even matter what you call it. Like you call it "smell you later," right? Like,
Okay, love it. If you could talk to any past or current president, who would that be?
gosh. Well, I would love to talk to former President Barack Obama about cannabis policy and how to move forward. So, I could give you a wish list on why I'd like to talk to Lincoln or something like that. But I have a very practical and real reason to wanting to talk to President Obama.
If you could win any award in the world, what would that award be and why?
It's an Oscar. It's an Oscar because you know why. It's an Oscar.
Okay. All right. If you had a chance to visit any place on the globe, where would that be and why?
I think about the pyramids a lot. Like I need to get to Cairo to see the pyramids. I don't have a reason.
Okay. Got it. Got two more. What does success look like to you? This is a little bit of a bigger question, but briefly, what does success look like to you?
Success, especially in the space that we're in now, means getting this paradigm shift over the finish line, like getting this transition period that we're in of hemp being more or less legal, cannabis being legal at the state level, but still totally illegal at the federal level. Like we have a lot of work to do to make cannabis legal fully in America again. And success to me is the full legalization of cannabis in America.
Got it. All right, final question. And Jim, this may be the most important one, so you got to answer this one carefully. Cards, cats, Hoosiers, or don't care?
First of all, I do care. And secondly, I'm offended that you put Hoosiers in the mix at all.
Got it. So
I'm a Cats fan living in Cards country. I'm a diehard Kentucky fan, always have been, always will be, but I'm not an unenlightened one. I root for Louisville when they're not playing Kentucky, and I know that takes its own level of flack. But being in New York for years and looking for that connection to home, back when Louisville was playing in the Big East, and I could always catch a Louisville basketball game on New York TV. That was a connection to home for me, even as a Kentucky fan. So, I am not an unenlightened Kentucky fan. I root for Louisville when they play Duke and Syracuse and et cetera. But I'm a Kentucky fan.
All right. Love it. All right. So we've got some fantastic questions that have come in. So the first one I'm going to ask comes in from Jason Woodall, and he's just asking for clarification. He said, was your crowdfunding all pre-revenue? And do you have any specifics you can share about terms that were offered at the time from WeFunder?
So we were in revenue when we crowdfunded. So we almost had a year of revenue under our belts when we went into crowdfunding, which everyone's going to go into crowdfunding at a different stage of revenue growth. And it really depends on, what industry you're in. We're a consumer packaged good company. It's going to be a lot different if you're an app or a tech startup in terms of revenue. Terms of the convertible note, we had an $8 million valuation cap on the note. The other terms at the moment escape me.
Got it. All right. Robert Auerbach has a question for you, and he proudly said that at Rainbow Blossom, they sell your product.
Rob Auerbach.
Yeah.
The Auerbachs have been incredibly good to our company. We're really thankful for Rob and Summer and the whole Rainbow Blossom team. Rainbow Blossom was our first retail account, and we're really appreciative and thankful for them.
Well, I got to tell you that too, that we are big fans of Rainbow Blossom, and we shop there all the time. So I echo that, Jim. He just wanted to know about what percentage of your current sales are online versus retail, brick and mortar.
It's a great question. A great question. Like from coming from Rob, who would want to know this sort of thing before the lockdown. This time last year, we were about 50-50 online versus retail, and because of the pandemic and what it did both to our retail numbers and also how we were able to grow online, we're about 90-10 now, online to retail. And we're hoping to grow the retail side of that equation now that we've really grown the online side. But the damage that the pandemic did to us was on the retail side.
Okay. All right, I got one more question for you, and this comes from Joshua, and he says that he's hearing a lot of pride in your voice when you talk about the history of Kentucky cannabis. How do you hope the Cornbread Mafia story ties in with the Cornbread brand that you're building in your story as well?
Well, I hope that it integrates, right? Like the Cornbread Mafia story, when it happened, was this scandalous, notorious, like perceived as a bad thing in our community. Like these men brought dishonor onto an otherwise good community for doing a thing, and that's just wrong, right? Like these guys, the unemployment rate in Marion County in 1980 was 20%. And these guys who were engaged in cannabis cultivation were feeding families, right? There was nothing wrong or bad about these guys breaking the law to grow cannabis. And the end result of the synthesis between the Cornbread Mafia story and the Cornbread Hemp brand is bringing into line this notion that there's nothing wrong with growing cannabis. There's nothing wrong with cultivating cannabis. And the Cornbread Mafia story will be seen in the long view of history as guys who are doing the right thing at the wrong time. And that's what I hope the brand brings into focus as we continue to grow and succeed, because we're doing things the right way, making the best possible products for the entire country. And we're doing it with the name that was given to these guys dishonorably. And we're taking that bad thing and we're making it good.
What a story, Jim. What a passion there. That's amazing. Well, thank you for asking that question, Joshua, just because it got us here to this answer from Jim. So, well, we are almost right at 1 o'clock, and we always try and end right on time. So, Jim, thank you so much for the time you've shared us today. I mean, not only have we heard your entrepreneur journey, which has been amazing, but the education and the background with which you speak on this is amazing. And people need to hear more of this, because you're not, coming at it from this political agenda or this, that, or the other. It's just factual data, and you're trying to make an impact. And I love that. So thank you so much for sharing this and even your journey on that. So just in wrapping up here with today's conversation, I want to give a big shout out to our team. Lisa wasn't able to join us today, but Austin is here. And again, this presentation went really, really well because of Austin and figuring out some tech stuff. So thank you for that, Austin, and making sure everything on the back end is going well. Also, again, just a big recognition to our sponsors, Amplify Louisville, Render Capital, Citation Labs, and Strategex. And here, even through the conversation today, we learned how instrumental Amplify and Render Capital was in the Cornbread Hemp story. And that's amazing. And I did not even know that connection was there prior to Jim sharing this. So it's really cool to see that coming forward.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, absolutely. And so just looking forward as well, next month, we've got Jessica Bledsoe from Paver talking about her story. And that event is scheduled for April 21st. We've got a tentative speaker coming up in May. I can't quite tell you yet who that is, but hopefully we'll be announcing that soon. Also, if you haven't heard yet, Truman's, which Alex Reed is one of the co-founders of, they just had a really cool exit earlier this week that was in the news here locally. And Alex, who was a previous guest of ours a few months ago when we first relaunched, is going to be coming back on in June to tell us about that experience. So we can't wait to hear how they scaled up Truman so quickly and went through that process. So a lot of exciting speakers coming your way. We love it when we get opportunities to have stories like Jim and so many other people, because it's not just another thing you read. You hear the passion and the energy and what they went through behind it. And along the way, we learn a lot. So, Jim, thank you again for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And for all of you that came on board today to listen to Jim's story, thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming Fireside Chats. So you all have a great day and enjoy those green beverages today on St. Patrick's Day. See you guys later. Have a great day. You're welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks.